Hey everyone, it's been a while since I made a video talking about the flat earth theory. Right now I'm making a long animated video, and because it's taking a while, I thought I'd make a quick video talking about Eric Dubay's 200 proofs Earth is not a spinning ball. Now, despite it being 4 years old, I still see it resurface in discussions relatively frequently. So in this video I'll just cover the first 20 or so arguments, and if time and resources allow, I might make more videos in the future covering the rest.
200 Proofs Earth is Not a Spinning Ball by Eric Dubay. 1. The horizon always appears perfectly flat 360 degrees around the observer regardless of altitude. All amateur balloon, rocket, plane, and drone footage show a completely flat horizon over 20 plus miles high.
So we've started off with a simple one, and probably the most common. When flat earthers bring this up, they're failing to recognise the immense size of the Earth we're living on. That's it.
Only NASA and other government space agencies show curvature in their fake CGI photos and videos.
Well, I'm afraid that's no longer the case. We now have private companies and experiments launching rockets into space like SpaceX and Rocket Lab. How come their observations seem to match exactly with government space agencies?
2. The horizon always rises to the eye level of the observer as altitude is gained, so you never have to look down to see it. If Earth were in fact a globe, no matter how large, as you ascended, the horizon would stay fixed and the observer would have to tilt looking down further and further to see it.
This is one of the really common flat Earth arguments I don't understand. As we can see in this quick animation, the horizon doesn't remain fixed whether you're on a globe Earth or a flat Earth.
3. The natural physics of water is to find and maintain its level. If Earth were a giant sphere tilted, wobbling, and hurtling through infinite space, then truly flat, consistently level surfaces would not exist here. But since Earth is in fact an extended flat plane, this fundamental physical property of fluids finding and remaining level is consistent with experience and common sense.
To say that water always finds its level is a primary school simplification. There are plenty of cases in nature where we see water curving. Here's one of them. This is also one of the first of many arguments in Eric's video that assumes gravity is pointing universally downward in the direction of the southern hemisphere, and not inward towards the centre of the Earth. Just to be sure, I created a highly simplified simulation of some fluid particles near a globe with gravity pointing in the correct direction. That's gravity.
4. Rivers run down to sea level, finding the easiest course, north, south, east, west, and all other intermediary directions over the Earth at the same time. If Earth were truly a spinning ball, then many of these rivers would be impossibly flowing uphill. For example, the Mississippi, in its 3,000 miles, would have to ascend 11 miles before reaching the Gulf of Mexico.
There's another one. Here we can see Eric once again failed to comprehend the basic nature of gravity. Gravity, as described by Isaac Newton over 300 years ago, showed that things fall towards Earth's centre of mass and not in some arbitrary universal direction.
5. One portion of the Nile River flows for 1,000 miles with a fall of only 1 foot. Parts of the West African Congo, according to the supposed inclination and movement of the ball Earth, would be sometimes running uphill and sometimes down. This would also be the case for the Parana, Paraguay, and other long rivers.
All this really is a clone of the last argument, so I think we can skip over it.
6. If Earth were a ball 25,000 miles in circumference, as NASA and modern astronomy claim, spherical trigonometry dictates the surface of all standing water must curve downward an easily measurable 8 inches per mile, multiplied by the square of the distance. This means, along a 6-mile channel of standing water, the Earth would dip 6 feet on either end from the central peak. Every time such experiments have been conducted, however, standing water has proven to be perfectly level.
He fails to list a single experiment showing lack of curvature over the ocean.
7. Surveyors, engineers, and architects are never required to factor the supposed curvature of the Earth into their projects. Canals, railways, bridges, and tunnels, for example, are always cut and laid horizontally, often over hundreds of miles without any allowance for curvature.
Once again, we fail to be given a single example of where this is true. I, however, do have a couple of examples to share, such as the Golden Gate Bridge. The two towers on the bridge are about 1,300 meters apart, and are almost 2 inches farther apart at the top than at the bottom. The distance between the pillars on the Verrazano-Narrows Bridge is also about 2 inches greater at the top than at the bottom. Why? Earth's curvature.
8. The Suez Canal, connecting the Mediterranean with the Red Sea, is 100 miles long without any locks, making the water an uninterrupted continuation of the two seas. When constructed, the Earth's supposed curvature was not taken into account. It was dug along a horizontal datum line, 26 feet below sea level, passing through several lakes from one sea to the other, with the datum line and the water's surface running perfectly parallel over the 100 miles.
You don't need to factor the Earth's curvature when digging a trench. You just dig. I'd also like to see some flat earthers see if they can see each other from one side of the canal to the other.
9. Engineer W. Winkler was published in the Earth Review regarding the Earth's supposed curvature, stating, "As an engineer of many years' standing, I saw that this absurd allowance is only permitted in school books. No engineer would dream of allowing anything of the kind. I have projected many miles of railways and many more of canals, and the allowance has not even been thought of, much less allowed for. This allowance for curvature means this, that it is 8 inches for the first mile of a canal and increasing at the ratio by the square of the distance in miles. Thus a small navigable canal for boats, say 30 miles long, will have, by the above rule, an allowance for curvature of 600 feet. Think of that, and then please credit engineers as not being quite such fools. Nothing of the sort is allowed. We no more think of allowing 600 feet for a line of 30 miles of railway or canal than of wasting our time trying to square the circle."
I did some research and found that the general consensus is that there is no such book called Earth Review with anything from an engineer W. Winkler in it. There is, however, extremely limited information around a publication called Earth Not a Globe Review, in which Winkler allegedly took part in. However, when you realise this publication is from the 1890s, the argument isn't so convincing. Was it really the best you could do, Eric, to dig out a quote from a publication over 120 years old from a man who probably didn't even exist?
10. The London and North Western Railway forms a straight line 180 miles long between London and Liverpool. The railroad's highest point midway at Birmingham Station is only 240 feet above sea level. If the world were actually a globe, however, curving 8 inches per mile squared, the 180-mile stretch of rail would form an arc with the center point at Birmingham raised over a mile, a full 5,400 feet above London and Liverpool.
Yet another time, Eric shows his inability to comprehend the true nature of gravity, and that it works towards the center of the Earth and not in one direction universally. A straight line when talking about railways means a straight line along the surface of Earth, not a straight line ignoring the curve and just going off into the sky. That's ridiculous. The next two arguments are virtually the same as this one, so I think we can skip those two.
13. In a 19th century French experiment by M.M. and Arago, a powerful lamp with good reflectors was placed on the summit of Desierto las Palmas in Spain, and able to be seen all the way from Capri on the island of Ibiza. Since the elevation of the 2 points were identical and the distance between covered nearly 100 miles, if the Earth were a ball 25,000 miles in circumference, the light should have been more than 6,600 feet, a mile and a quarter, below the line of sight.
After a couple of quick Google searches, we can easily find that the identical heights between the 2 points is a complete lie. The summit of the Palm Desert Mountains is 729 meters. The highest point in Ibiza, however, the secondary location, is 475 meters. This is blatant proof Eric is lying about his figures.
14. The Lieutenant Colonel Portlock experiment used oxyhydrogen Drummond's lights and heliostats to reflect the sun's rays across stations set up across 108 miles of St. George's Channel. If the Earth were actually a ball 25,000 miles in circumference, Portlock's light should have remained hidden under a mile and a half of curvature.
This one suffers from the same problem as the last, except it's even worse. We don't even get any figures for the locations of these lights. I'd say it's probably safe to assume Eric is relying on his audience to be too lazy to research this for themselves. However, in another flat earth book called Zetetic Astronomy, we get another account of the experiment with somewhat usable figures. Lieutenant Colonel Portlock, who observed the station on Preseli, a mountain in South Wales, from the station on Kipper, a mountain about 10 miles southwest of Dublin, the distance between the stations being 108 miles, says, For 5 weeks I watched in vain, when, to my joy, the heliostat blazed out in the early beams of the rising sun, and continued visible as a bright star the whole day. Kippur, the mountain and island, has a height of 757 meters, or 2,484 feet. Using an Earth curvature calculator, we find that 108 miles away in the Preseli Hills, the lights would have needed to be at least 1,470 feet above sea level to have been seen. Conveniently for us, there are 3 peaks in the Preseli Hills I dare not attempt to pronounce that are over that height, meaning we should easily be able to see the lights.
15. If the Earth were truly a sphere 25,000 miles in circumference, airplane pilots would have to constantly correct their altitudes downwards so as to not fly straight off into outer space. A pilot wishing to simply maintain their altitude at a typical cruising speed of 500 miles per hour would have to constantly dip their nose downwards and descend 2,777 feet, over half a mile, every minute. Otherwise, without compensation, in 1 hour's time, the pilot would find themselves 31.5 miles higher than expected.
There are a couple reasons why planes wouldn't just fly off into space if they were set off in a straight line. The first being that as the air gets thinner the higher you go, there comes a point when wings on a plane are useless as there isn't enough lift to counteract the plane's weight. Also, planes don't go nearly fast enough to escape Earth's gravity. Why do you think we have rockets? And on top of that, pilots do correct their course all the time. I think that might just be why we have pilots in the first place.
16. The experiment known as Airy's failure proved that stars move relative to a stationary Earth and not the other way around. By first filling a telescope with water to slow down the speed of light inside, then calculating the tilt necessary to get the starlight directly down the tube, Airy failed to prove the heliocentric theory, since the starlight was already coming in the correct angle with no change necessary, and instead proved the geocentric model correct.
Like the Michelson-Morley experiment, Airy's failure was one of the experiments that attempted to prove or disprove the existence of a hypothetical ether, a medium that people thought allowed light to travel through space in the 19th and early 20th century. The experiment took place in 1871 and was testing to see if a different refractive medium would change the stellar aberration of light. The results showed that there was no change. This has absolutely nothing to do with a flat Earth, and stellar aberration actually requires Earth to be moving.
17. Olber's paradox states that if there were billions of stars, which are suns, the night sky would be filled completely with light. As Edgar Allan Poe said, were the succession of stars endless, then the background of the sky would present us a uniform luminosity, since there could exist absolutely no point in all that background at which would not exist a star. In fact, Olber's paradox is no more a paradox than George Airy's experiment was a failure. Both are actually excellent refutations of the heliocentric spinning ball Earth model.
Sorry Eric, but you're 200 years behind on that one. Heinrich Olbers, the German astronomer who proposed the paradox, died in the year 1840. Since that time, of course, advances in science have given valid reasons why the sky isn't just a white blaze. Aside from gas and dust within our galaxy filtering out some portion of visible light, we now know that the observable universe is not infinite, and on top of that, starlight is stretched in the expanding universe in a process called redshift, which reduces the brightness of the light. Therefore, it is completely reasonable for the sky to be dark in our universe.
18. The Michelson-Morley and Sagnac experiments attempted to measure the change in speed of light due to Earth's assumed motion through space. After measuring in every possible different direction in various locations, they failed to detect any significant change whatsoever, again proving the stationary geocentric model.
The Michelson-Morley experiment is actually another test of the ether, and all it proved was that if the Earth was in motion, the ether could not exist. And because the movement of the Earth has already been proven through other experiments, the ether could not exist. This is yet another case of flat earthers twisting iconic experiments from the history of science to promote their theory, hoping their audience is too lazy to research it themselves.
19. Tycho Brahe famously argued against the heliocentric theory in his time, positing that if the Earth revolved around the Sun, the change in relative position of the stars after 6 months' orbital motion could not fail to be seen. He argued that the stars should seem to separate as we approach and come together as we recede. In actual fact, however, after 190 million miles of supposed orbit around the Sun, not a single inch of parallax can be detected in the stars, proving that we have not moved at all.
To say that stellar parallax has never been observed is a complete lie. One of the first successful detections of stellar parallax was in 1838 by Friedrich Bessel. Today it's used to calculate the distance to stars as well as other celestial objects.
20. If Earth were truly constantly spinning eastwards at over 1,000 miles per hour, vertically fired cannonballs and other projectiles should fall significantly due west. In actual fact, however, when this has been tested, vertically fired cannonballs shoot upwards an average of 14 seconds ascending, 14 seconds descending, and fall back to the ground no more than 2 feet away from the cannon, often directly back into the muzzle.
That's because of such a thing called inertia, Eric. Alright, that's 20 of the 200 proofs Earth isn't a spinning ball, hopefully sufficiently debunked. I hope you enjoyed, because I certainly did. And please let me know if you'd like to see more of these, because there are definitely more ridiculous arguments coming our way. Thanks for watching.